delusional. The journey is through from getting into the body, getting clear mentally, allowing ourselves to feel. In other words, the teachings have always been there. Unless we become a child again, unless we enter this 7-year period and integrate it, we cannot enter a state of balance where everything is in even heaven. So that's the journey. So what's happening at the moment is that we are going through a profound evolutionary experience. But because it's inside out, backwards, and upside down, it looks to us, because we take the physical world as the causal point, it looks like there's something going on in the sun that's happening to us. No. It's something going on within us that is being reflected in our experience of the sun. The sun is starting to speak to us. We were told we would enter vibrational awareness around this time. Every 13,000 years, humanity does. It's a 13,000-year cycle. We are now entering vibrational awareness. The thing is, if we do not hear and be able to listen to the sun, and how does the sun speak to us? The geomagnetic field causes our memories to come up unconsciously, and we see all sorts of fear, anger, and grief outside of us. The fear, anger, and grief outside of us is the sun speaking to us. If we react to that, if we go into battle with these demons, we will destroy ourselves and people around us. The consequences of reflecting on nothing, to reflect is nothing, to project is massive. It's massive. So listening to the sun means, what is the sun? It's a reflection of my heart. That's all it is. Learn to speak the language of the heart, which is through felt perception. Felt perception. That's the language, that is the only language that can truly tell us what's going on, that can truly steer us in the right direction so that we can consciously respond to what's going on. So what the presence process does is it creates a conscious pathway back into the emotional body and gives us the tools that enable us to become our mother, our father, our brother, our sister, a fully integrated whole being that gives us an opportunity to return to holiness. It's not about making us happy. Happiness destroys us. Trying to feel good is only because we feel bad. Trying to be comfortable is only because we're uncomfortable. Trying to have it easy is only because it's so hard. We have to get away from running from that which is hard, because that which is hard is actually the condition of my own emotional body that I'm suppressing and sedating. So the work is to re-enter emotional body awareness, to enter felt perception, so that my heart can feel what's going on all the time. That's to enter love again, the love frequency, the evolving frequency. We're only consciously evolving when we're working from the causal point of our experience. A whole new order, a very different way of being erupts in a world that goes into that place as the causal point. Because where there is love, there is no law. It's a very different way of functioning. All justice in the world at the moment is revenge. All justice is revenge. If a man is taken for abusing a child and thrown in prison, that's revenge. That's not justice. There's no justice there. Because if you take that man who's abused that child and trace back to his childhood, you will find abuse imprinted there. Until we consciously awaken to this point of our experience, whatever we feel from the time we're born to 7 years old, whatever we feel, whether we like it or not, becomes our definition of what we think love is. If I'm bashed around as a child, I will look for a partner who will eventually bash me around. And I will push that person until they bash me around, because only when I get bashed around do I feel loved. Why? Because my definition of love is based on this dysfunctional pattern here. Based on that pattern here. So my job is to go into this place to release those dysfunctions. And by being my own parent, by being my own brother and sister, I will then create a definition of love that will be determined by how I behave towards myself. I have to learn to be unconditional with myself before I learn what unconditional is. I can't go, you better be unconditional with me. It's the only way I'm going to be unconditional with you. I have to learn to be the unconditional parent to myself. We're all created in the image of the Creator. In other words, we're created complete within ourselves. We have to get into that integrated state of being ourselves. Once we get to this place where we develop emotional body awareness, felt perception, a vocabulary of feeling, then grace comes when it comes. And grace is a direct communication from the vibrational. It's not going to come if we're stuck here, because even if it does, we won't be able to perceive it. In fact, it's really happening all the time. It's happening all the time. It's happening all the time. So that's the journey of the presence process. It opens up the pathway of awareness. It enables us to start moving our awareness back into our emotional body, to teaches us how to become responsible for the quality of our experience, how to do that consistently. There isn't a day or a moment where I'm not responsible for our emotional body. And most of all, how to do it compassionately. I'm going to have to learn, if I am placing conditions on myself, I'm going to have to face some hard things. Because I have to learn to be with myself, to accept myself, to take care of myself, to nurture myself, teach myself, heal myself, and guide myself, no matter what's going on, no matter what. In other words, it doesn't matter what the physical world is doing or showing to me. I can't base my behavior towards myself on the material world. No matter what, I have to take care of myself. That's my responsibility. Only once I enter that unconditional relationship with myself can I even begin to perceive that which is unconditional. If I think I can know what God is when I can't even be conditional with myself, it's arrogant, deluded, it's reactionary, it's divisive. Most of our approaches to God are actually barters and trying to do a deal. If I do this, you must do that. It doesn't work like that. The greatest tool we have is appreciation. The greatest tool we have is appreciation. If a parent gives a child a lump sum of money, say the teenage child, and that teenage child wastes that money and throws it away. The parent, if the child is not so reactive, will still look after the child but not give it any more money. Why? Because it can't appreciate. What is appreciation? Appreciation is a form of gratitude, but it's not only that. Appreciation means to make more of. When I have stocks and shares and they appreciate, it means they become more. So if a parent gives a child money, a lump sum of money, and the child makes more of it, it's appreciating it. That parent will give that child more and more and more, and one day it will give the child everything. Why? Because it knows that whatever is given is appreciated. If we get given this life experience, no matter how it looks to us, and we run away from it, trying to find some spiritual path to rescue us from it, and we try and find all these things to make it different, and we have been given this vehicle, this mental body to navigate. This emotional body is such a powerful fuel. It can move us. That's where real movement is. Change the emotional body, your life moves. It's a source of movement. If I don't appreciate that and I run and look for something else, I might get taken care of, if I'm not that reactive that I even resist that. But I won't be given more. I won't be given more. But if I appreciate it, if I appreciate this, which I can only do when I come and settle in the moment, which means I need to go through my fear, anger, and grief and stop running away from it and come into this moment, and I appreciate my life, it grows. It gets deeper. It gets deeper and deeper. Because actually, there is nowhere to go. There's just more of this. There's nowhere to go. There's no destination. There's just more of this. And if I can only get more of this, if I can allow myself to feel it and appreciate it through that feeling body, I will get more. And the great moreness of it is when I awaken to the vibrational awareness, which is my authentic self, what I really am. Immortal consciousness that has been going on forever and will go on forever. There's another saying, to be in the world, but not be of it. In other words, I have started on a mission as consciousness, which would take 13,000 years to grow a good garden. Good garden. All right? And what the garden means is getting consciousness to move fully into the physical world and getting it anchored here. Once it's anchored, to then stay anchored here and move awareness back into the vibrational, to the source of anything. To stand in this world, this physical world, but to have consciousness of an immortal being. Not just thinking about it or believing it, but knowing it. That consciousness of the vibrational knows no order of difficulty. No order of difficulty. That which creates everything, what can be difficult for it? There's no order of difficulty. We are entering a period when we have the opportunity to stand in this physical world, but interact with it from a point of no order of difficulty. We cannot even conceive what that's like. But that's the gift. That's what the Son is trying to tell us. That's what the Son, those are the words the Son is speaking. We can't understand it because at the moment we can't even understand the language of vibration. We can't understand what's coming out of our own hearts. The first step is to get in the body, to get some mental clarity about what's going on, and to redevelop the vocabulary required to interact with the vibrational. That's my story, and I'm going to stick to it.
South African Michael Brown is the author of The Presence Process, a healing journey into present moment awareness. In the late 1980s, he was living what he called a blissfully unconscious life as a music journalist.
If you call me, I will hear.
While on a music tour in South Africa, something happened that was to change his life forever.
And we were driving along onto the next venue, and the next thing I started feeling this weird feeling in my eye, which escalated into such unbelievable pain that I had to get out of the car and started throwing up on the side of the road. And at that time I thought it was just a one-off thing. I thought it was just, I didn't know what I thought, I can't even remember, but it was such excruciating pain. And then it continued to happen again and again and again. And so that was the start of it. And it was probably about 2 years before I actually got diagnosed as to what it was. And the diagnosis was that it was called Horton's syndrome or Horton's cathalgia, which is like a cross between neuralgia and cluster headaches and migraine. And they usually take about 45 minutes to go through. And what happens is all the nerve endings starting in the neck up into the side of the face and to the top of the head get swollen and bruised. And there's nothing you can take for it because from the time you know it's happening to the time it peaks is usually about 10 to 15 minutes, and there's nothing that can stop it. And normally a person who suffers from that condition would have it seasonally. So you would have it for 3 months a year, for the same 3 months every year, and maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And my condition was that I had it sometimes up to 8 times a day, and I had it 12 months a year. That's what it took to get my attention, really. Well, I first did the obvious thing that we all do if we have something like that happen to us, was I looked for help outside of myself. And I went to everything. It was my first real introduction into spiritual healing. I went to see a Sangoma. I had cortisone injections in my face. On Christmas Eve, I had my wisdom teeth extracted, thinking that it could be that. And I mentioned to my late father-in-law that I had once taken LSD, and I had found I was pain-free from taking LSD for about 3 or 4 days. And he said that was interesting. There was a drug called a Sansert at the time, which had a gotamine in it, a derivative of LSD, and that was used as a pain remedy for nerve pains. So I was put on that, and the pain went away. And that lasted for a year, and then they stopped manufacturing that drug. And after I couldn't get that drug in my hand anymore, I realized I'd become addicted to that drug. It was not that it did anything to me, but I was addicted to the fact that this could help me. And I remember it was also just approaching Christmas in San Francisco when I couldn't get the drug in my hands. And it was the most terrible sinking feeling when I had my first attack again. By then I also realized that whenever I went to anyone to tell them what was going on with me, I knew more about it than them. I'd become the authority on my own condition. So it was pointless going to anyone because I knew more about, what I was going through. And I realized that I couldn't live with this. I either had to kill myself or I had to heal myself. One night I had a terrible night. I had about 8 attacks. At that time I was married to a woman called Sarah Prowl. And she had a gift voucher for a friend, a massage voucher. And I begged her, I said, please give it to me. I've got to have some care and attention to my body today. I'm in so much pain. So I got the massage voucher for her, and I went and had the massage. And it was such a bad massage that I came back and I said to Sarah, I could do a better massage with both my hands tied behind my back. And she said, well, why don't you? And so that week I enlisted in the San Francisco School of Massage. And I found the moment that I started putting my attention into massage, and then I started to study polarity, and then I started to study Reiki, then I started to understand my own energy. And I found that when my energy was really up, I was less susceptible to pain. When my energy was down, so it almost seemed that there was a state of consciousness in which that pain, I was very susceptible to that pain. And if I could raise my awareness, or my state of consciousness, I became less susceptible. And today I know that as being called present and being distracted or unconscious or, not in the moment. Well, the first thing was that as I got involved in healing, I forgot that it was me that I was trying to heal. And so when you get involved in healing and you start to discover these tools, and some of them work and some of them don't, it's quite empowering, and you think, well, I want to share this with other people. I want to heal other people. And I eventually, in Tucson, opened my own healing practice and started doing healing work on other people. But really the turning point for me, as far as bringing it into a procedure was concerned, was when I first took peyote. I had taken other types of drugs before in my life, and they'd always made me feel out of it. It took me out of myself. Is the only way I can say. In fact, I used them to get out of it because I was so unhappy in my own life, so I would use them to get out of it. But what peyote did is it brought me in to this body. It made me, for the first time, I felt 100% physically present, completely mentally clear, completely emotionally balanced, and what I would say is vibrationally connected, or people may use the word spiritual. I felt spiritually connected to my source, or whatever one may say that. And in that moment of clarity, I realized that the pain had nothing to do with what was happening to me now. The pain was related to something that happened to me from the past. It was really, what was happening was that my body was creating a situation of pain to try and bring me back into my body, because so much of myself was trapped in memories and unintegrated places in the past. And in that moment, I saw that that was one of the most desperate conditions of humanity, is that most of us did not live in the moment We really lived in the past. We determined what we were going to do now based on the past or projecting our fears into the future. Most of our awareness wasn't here available. It was trapped in unintegrated memories. And I realized that the most powerful thing I could do was to bring as much of myself into this moment as possible. And that also, if I could do that in a way that I could leave a trail of how I accomplished it, that would be of use to other people who might want to do the same thing. In that moment, sitting on the banks of a river which was actually called the Gila River, although it's spelled G-I-L-A, sitting on the banks of the Gila River, I realized that because I saw this in myself and I knew that I had no choice now but to bring myself present, that I could also do it as a way of service. I actually forgot about that intent. You know, what happened was that intent was so powerful that it drove me into all sorts of experiences, which I felt at the time I was going through them, that I was really just bumbling through experiences. But in hindsight, I see what I was doing was I was going to this person, that teacher, that ceremony, that shaman, and looking for what made me present. And so they would do things to me or show me things to do to myself. And I was specifically interested in what can I do to myself. That's why I like breathing. You know, I can breathe. No one has to breathe for me. And I liked Reiki because I can put my hands on myself. I liked anything I can do to myself. So I would try out anything. And then I would have a barometer of present moment awareness, which was the peyote experience. Does it bring me towards that space or does it not do that? And if it brought me towards that space, I kind of put it in my toolbox. And so I spent years collecting these tools, went to Mexico, went all over the place. And then I got to a point when I was on a beach in Mexico, I was sitting there, I was kind of not even focusing on this work, and I suddenly saw a process, more in a pathway of awareness of how we enter this world and how we get trapped in certain perceptual or emotional situations, but how we enter the world. And also, by seeing that pathway so clearly, I could see how you would need to tread that pathway in reverse to return to yourself. And I realized that I had all the tools. And it was a matter of actually putting together in a process that people could do no matter who they are, where they are, what lifestyle they're leading, and in a way that they could do it for themselves. And that's when I came back to South Africa and started putting the process together. And then going, who wants to play? You know, who wants to come and do it? I did a talk at which there were 90 people that came. I mainly did a talk about the tools of integration, about this experience of integration. And in that talk, which was about 3 hours, for about 10 minutes, I spoke about this process of becoming present. And I just put it in there. And 12 people came forward and said, that thing you mentioned about that process thing, what's that about? And so I started with them. And I said, okay, volunteer. We don't know what's going to happen. I know what the tools do to me, but let's see what it does if I put you through a 10-week process, focusing on these tools to bring you present and to bring your unintegrated memories up and teach you how to resolve them. It was really scary, especially when the first person finished, you know, because at the end of the 10 weeks, you want them to have something, you know. And what I realized was that this was not about destination consciousness, and nor was it about fixing anything. And what the process was a way to transform your behavior from reactive consciousness to response consciousness. Really, all the process does is to teach you how to begin taking responsibility for your own experience. And the consequences to that are eternal. When people were going through the procedure, everyone was having great insights and ahas and wow and all these things. But the real feedback came roughly 8 to 9 months after people had done the process. And I realized that there was an 8 to 9 month period, almost like a womb period, in which people had now transformed themselves from reacting to the world because of their suppressed discomfort, their fear, anger, and grief, which was motivating their behavior unconsciously. They went from reacting to the world to actually responding to it. And after many months of learning how to respond to it, their whole experience of life began to change. And really what happened is they entered a journey. And plus what I saw is that they would, after a few weeks or a month or so, go back into the process and have a completely different experience of it, because they were now entering it at a different point of awareness, and it meant something different to them. And then they would enter it again after a few months, and it would be like doing it the first time again. There's no ways I can really train people to do this. The universe trains you to do this sort of work. So either I was going to train a whole lot of facilitators, which I don't want to take the responsibility for, and also because they'll end up going and charging fortunes for this special process, or I find a way to put it in a book so that anyone can read the book. The book trains you, puts you through the process, and gives you an opportunity to do it as often as you want. And that took me about 3 years to get it into a book, into a format. And then of course getting it published, and that process again, also working with Connie Kellock from Must Stay Publishing. She also helped me make it a bit more gentle, because I was quite hardcore, and am quite hardcore in approaching these things, but I wanted to make it available for everyone. So the initial process had to be really toned down, because when you are enabling people to bring up their unprocessed memories and emotional stuff, you have to do it in a really responsible, compassionate way. There is no way to say exactly what this process does for you, because in the book I have about 45 different fruits of the process. But basically what the process is about teaching someone to move their awareness to the causal point of their behavior, so they can take responsibility for their own experiences and move out of a state of blame, and that the world is happening to me. I'm radiating my state into the world, and to teach someone how to actually do that experientially. The rewarding thing for me is not really related to what this is doing for other people, because I can never really know what it's doing for other people. And I do see people going through powerful experiences, and I get emails every day from people I don't even know saying this has been life-saving, or it's put everything in perspective. I get emails from PhD psychologists going, at least now we have a model to work with that makes sense. I get all sorts of things, but these things, I don't really pay that much attention to those. What I pay attention to is, what has this done for my experience? And what it's done for me is it's taken me gradually out of operating from a point of fear, out of having my behavior driven by anger, out of having my behavior driven by grief, and enabling me really to move into what I call the trinity of what I aspire to accomplish in this life, which is integrity, intimacy, and authenticity. If I accomplish those things to my satisfaction in this life, it's a life well lived. And so that's what it's doing for me. It's allowing me to become more authentic, become really more of who I am, which means that I can honor who I am in each moment that I'm having. Okay, so if I'm feeling angry, I can honor that. I'm not going to suppress that. It's enabling me to become more intimate. In other words, when I'm with people, to actually be with them and not be triggered by what they're reflecting of my past, and then be distracted by that. And integrity is really about lining up my physical behavior with my mental behavior and my emotional behavior, to have them all reflect each other honestly. Now, for a lot of us in the world, we have physical behavior, but it doesn't really reflect our mental behavior. Because mentally I'm going, and I have these beliefs and stuff about the world, and I'm behaving differently physically. Or it doesn't reflect my emotional behavior. I'm really afraid, and I'm behaving as if I'm all brave. So that's where the integrity comes in. For me, integrity is the same word as structure. I'm the product of my own process, and it's still enabling me to grow. I still use the tools, and it's definitely giving me a life experience far more awesome, and I like the word groovy, than I could ever thought that I would have. And I'm still feeling the fruits of it every day. I'm on a journey. It's not a destination. It's really journey consciousness. One of the things that I figured out for myself is that if this intelligence we call God is an infinite being, then God realization is an infinite journey. And so I've given up this thing that there's a destination of enlightenment or something that I've got to get to. Now I'm learning to enjoy the journey in this moment, honor myself in this moment, honor the moment as it shows itself to me and not force my practices onto it or my interpretations onto it. That's what that to me is the most rewarding thing. And to find that these transformations in my experience are consistent and permanent. I can't fix anybody. I've figured that one out. And I can't save anybody, and I don't want to be saved or fixed by anybody. And this is not even a spiritual thing. This is really life skills. So what gives me the conviction to continue teaching this to people is I see what it does to myself. And also the more into this moment I get, and I still have my moments of being distracted and all, but the more into this moment I get, the more you can see how other people are suffering. And the only reason they are suffering is because they're not here. And the only reason they are suffering too is because they don't realize they are responsible for the consequences of their thoughts, words, and deeds. And those thoughts, words, and deeds are what are creating this moment's experience for them. That's the real suffering, not the physical pain or the mental or the emotional stuff. The real suffering is not empowering ourselves and knowing that we're responsible for our experience. If I don't have a clue I'm responsible for my experience, I'm continuously looking for a political organization or a spiritual organization or somebody outside myself to take care of me and fix things. And that's real suffering. And that places a person who's a beggar at a traffic light begging for food and a person who's in a BMW who's stressed out from their job in the same playing field. Consequences. We're all responsible for our own consequences. And the causal point of those consequences for me are what's going on in my emotional body. Well, you know, guru means G, you are you. G, you are you. That's all it means. And that's really all any guru can teach you. But I think that a lot of people are looking for a guru or a master or something because they think it's the right thing to do spiritually, and also because they've never met one. And so if you've met a real one, then you would never think that I was such a thing. You'd never have that level of confusion. But that's why I say this is an emotional cleansing process. It's not a spiritual thing. It's not a spiritual thing. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what skin color you are, any of that doesn't matter. You can still do this. And I have in my book quoted religious scriptures, but I've only done that to take the religious robes off them and say, look, this actually, when this person taught this, they weren't being religious or spiritual. They were just trying to share basic human life skills. So these are basic human life skills. And also, I have given myself a cutoff point for this work. So at a certain point, I walk away. I'm no longer available because I'm not going to become a caricature of Michael Brown, the presence process teacher. There is a point at which I walk away, and I have to walk away because I want this to be the most authentic self-facilitation tool on the planet. That's my intention for it. And so I have to let it go so that it can either sink or swim. And I can't be attached to that. There's other aspects to my life besides the presence process. And besides me as being an author of a book. I have a whole range of other experiences that I want to explore. And I'm not going to allow this to take me up just because it may be successful, especially if it's successful. I'm not going to create an identity through it. I'm actually not interested in that. And in fact, I recently wrote an article on my website called God Save Me from Becoming a Spiritual Person. And it's really designed to let people know I do not regard myself as a spiritual person. I'm not using this as a tool to elevate myself to being a spiritual person. I cannot fix you of anything that's going on with you. I don't want to fix you. I don't care whether you do this process or not. I cannot care. And the reason for the fact that I cannot and do not care is the fact that you can only succeed in emotional cleansing if you come to it out of your own will. If you come to it because you want to please someone else, or because you want to better your relationship with someone else, or you want to prove something to someone else, you will fail. Because the will that you need to face your own fear, anger, and grief has to come from your desire to do so, not from your desire to do it for somebody else. I have absolute faith that the people that are going to do this process will be drawn to it. They will find the book whether I stand up and talk about it or not. They will get to it. And the people that are not meant to do this work will never come close to it. What I'm doing when I go and teach is I'm invited to go and teach. I don't ask to go and teach. Wherever I go, it's because I'm invited. I'm standing in front of people who are choosing to do this work, and I will share my experience of it with them. And then I get out and leave. And that's why at some point I have to have a cutoff and say, I'm no longer available. Sink or swim. Because that's the only way that this will really become authentically self-facilitating.
And if you believe in this world, you won't believe in me. If you believe in what you have been told, you won't believe what will set you free.